Well, Alex, I've noticed a couple times over the last few months listening to some of my favorite stations, and I actually still do listen to radio a little, but there's a big station in LA, and just last week, I heard them play a commercial break that lasted 10 minutes long. It might have been nine and a half, it was around 9.5 to 10 minutes long. There had to be like 17, 18 commercials in a row. How can they possibly think they can get away with doing that and keep any listeners?
We have to remember, Sam, that it's corporate chuckleheads making these decisions. I think a lot of people in the audience are thinking the DJ controls radio still to this day.
Probably.
A lot of people don't think that anymore.
A lot of people don't care, probably.
Yeah, a lot of people aren't even
details.
thinking at all when they're listening to the radio. All they want is noise to fill up the emptiness in their car.
True.
But I don't think a lot of people listen to commercials that much. I think as soon as they hear the first commercial, they're gone and looking for another station on the dial.
Right.
So from an audience perspective, a listener might not notice all these commercials. I know you do, because you've been in the industry and you will sit through it as a joke just to see how much these chuckleheads will keep it going.
Exactly. Plus, I also know that if I switch to another station, I'm going to hear commercials because they all have them scheduled at the same exact time practically.
Exactly.
So it's almost pointless to switch.
Right. So a lot of people pop in their CD or
Right.
what other alternative they might find. I myself sing while I drive. I don't even listen to radio anymore. For the very reason we're talking about, that just too many commercials and on top of too many generic corporate songs. But sticking with the commercial aspect of it, how do chuckleheads get away with this? Well, from the corporate chucklehead perspective, and let's let this freaking
Ice cream truck.
ice cream truck drive by. Okay. An ice cream truck is kind of like the chuckleheads in the sense that it's selling kind of like lightweight stuff with no nutrition.
Right.
That's called pop.
And their playlist only has one song.
Right.
That's where the chuckleheads are headed.
Right. And the menu is limited.
It's going to be Stairway to Heaven 5,000 times a day on the classic rock station.
Right. If you think of each ice cream cone and each popsicle as a commercial for itself, that's kind of like how radio works. Every commercial you hear is basically an account for that station. And all the radio station cares about is jamming as many accounts on the air as possible to pay for all those stations that they bought with borrowed money. Not just the station itself, but in that cluster of stations within the corporation. And they have to repay that money to the bank, not all at once, of course, but over time. And all they have to worry about really is the monthly payment, just like a credit card. And as long as they pay that minimum payment, then they get to stay in business. So that's why they play so many commercials, is to try to catch up, to pay off some of that debt. But what they're really, worried about is just making the monthly payment, which for some stations is like 150 grand or something like that. Each commercial might be anywhere from, depending on market size, anywhere from 25 bucks to 500 bucks. In a big market like LA, it's 500 bucks or maybe even more. I don't know for sure. But in a small market, it's probably closer to $25 to $50 every time you hear that commercial. For small biz, it's just not a good deal because it just drains their budgets, and you have to do a lot of repetition in order for radio advertising to work. Otherwise, it doesn't work. It's just money down the drain. So it works for nightclubs for sure, because nightclubs tie in with a music station, especially a company that sells concert tickets or just sells music that ties in with the music played on that radio station. Car companies like to advertise on various radio stations because all it takes is really one sale to pay for all that advertising. Whereas, and that's true of real estate companies as well. But stations that sell, units of $1, $2 items, or advertisers that sell one item that costs $1 or $2, it's not a good deal for them.
Right.
Restaurants that sell, $25 plates, it might not be a good idea for them.
Probably not. And most restaurants typically sell $10
Yeah.
per person,
Yeah.
and advertising wouldn't be
They'd have to
beneficial for
get a
them.
ton of people into their restaurant to pay for all that advertising, and a lot of times it just doesn't pay off. So the way the radio station gets away with jamming all these commercials is they convince the advertiser, the person, the company buying the advertising, that somehow this will help their business. Now, does it help their business? Well, I don't know, because I went to a radio remote back in June, I think it was, that was supposed to attract a crowd, and it didn't. I was one of the few people there, and they were even giving away free pizza, and that still didn't bring a crowd. Only 20 people showed up, and I was one of them, but I didn't hear the commercial on the air. I just happened to be walking by. So that should tell you right there that radio advertising can only go so far. It's not necessarily effective unless you do it all the time, like you jam it around the clock, and you do it particularly in drive time, which is morning drive and afternoon drive.
Right.
Because that's when people listen to radio the most.
And something tells me, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I bet like back in the 70s, even a majority of the 80s, radio advertising was probably a lot more effective.
I think it was.
Because there wasn't so much of it.
Yeah.
People actually cared about the stations they listened to because they were more local.
Yeah.
And
plus, you didn't how many minutes in a row did you hear of commercials?
A couple times in the last month, I've heard 9 to 10 minute commercial breaks.
I mean, we had a limit on Quad in Sacramento back in the 90s, and that was 5 minutes per stop set, which is a station break.
Right.
And that was the limit. You couldn't go over 5 minutes. And we only did 2 stop sets an hour, so that was 10 minutes of commercials per hour. Now it's probably 20 minutes of commercials per hour for a music station. I know that talk stations get away with up to 32 minutes of commercials per hour, and that's incredible. The way they get away with it is the talk itself sounds like it mixes with commercials, because it's not music. It just sounds like someone's blabbering,
talking the whole hour.
Right.
And whether it's a commercial or the program, doesn't matter.
And people trapped in office situations where they have to listen to Rush Limbaugh, to them it's probably relief to hear a commercial instead of that blabbermouth.
True.